Welcome to Senior Moment with Nurse Linda. And as you can see, there's a pumpkin there. It's empty, so if you want to stop by and drop off some candy, come ahead. This is Dr. Charles Campbell. Today I'm dressed up as Santa Claus in civvies. And this is Nurse Linda, and she's reverting back to her hippie days.
Absolutely.
Are you old enough to be a hippie?
Yes, I'm on the young end of it, but yes, I am.
Hmm.
Yes, 1969 were very formative years for me. That was early teenage years, and yes,
Ah,
I remember all of Hyde Ashbury and all the hippie movements and Flower Children and yeah, all of that. I
well, you,
pictured myself at one point living out of a van for a few years and kind of roaming the country and doing all of that. Then I took sense of myself, and that didn't happen.
went to nursing school. Yeah, it made a big difference. Anyway, welcome to Senior Moment with Nurse Linda. Today we're talking about Halloween.
Yes,
First segment is on
we're gonna do the history of Halloween.
it has a history.
It has a history, yes.
Well,
And many people have a misconception about what Halloween is. Halloween is one of my most favorite holidays.
okay.
And
The big pumpkin comes down in the field. That's what Peanuts did. Our second segment is going to be on interesting tidbits of facts about Halloween.
Halloween trivia. And I'm hoping I'll give people a few things they didn't know about before.
Okay, and the third section is going to be on pumpkins.
Pumpkins. The history of the pumpkin.
It has a history.
The jack-o'-lantern has a history, yes.
Oh, cool.
Yes. So
Like I said. Ooh, ooh. I got that for $1 at Walmart. I'm too old to go out trick or treating. Let's see if I can get this up. Halloween goes back how far?
Oh, it goes back many, many centuries. It actually goes back to the Celts and the Druids back in Ireland and England. And that's where this had its beginnings. The end of October, beginning of November was actually their day. They celebrated their New Year. So October 31st was essentially their New Year's Eve. And this is when fall went to winter for them. They were celebrating their harvest and praying that the harvest was going to get them through the harsh winter. And this was the day they felt that the veil between life and death was the thinnest. And if there were any souls who had passed in the previous year, this was their time. They would build bonfires and say prayers and chant and help the souls be raised up to heaven.
Sounds like a bunch of hippie freaks.
And that was the purpose of it. They did this for many years. Different kinds of things grew out of it. Bats were associated with Halloween based, they feel, on this because, let's face it, back then there was no electricity. And the only time there was light in the evening is when somebody had a big fire lit. And what are bats drawn to? Light. And they're drawn to bugs. And light and heat are going to draw bugs. So people would start seeing bats flying around.
Sort of like New Jersey now.
Yeah, lots of bats flying around New Jersey. This was a time of thanksgiving and a time of praise. And eventually, what kind of grew out of it, and there's a little discrepancy on this, but they felt that the Celts had actually dressed up in costume or masks, they would paint their faces, to protect themselves from the spirits. And the spirits wouldn't stay with them because they would scare the spirits and would actually raise up to heaven.
Cool. When was that?
Yes. This was all on that October 31st time. Halloween itself, believe it or not, actually grew out of the attempt of the Catholic Church to Christianize the Druids.
Oh, it sounds like fun.
Yes, what they tried to do was instead of making the holiday go away, they convinced the Druids and the Celts that what they were doing was worshiping the dead who were evil. They were evil spirits, so they shouldn't do that. But they made November 1st All Saints' Day. And then they realized, well, they couldn't just worship the saints because these people were worshiping their own. So they made November 2nd All Souls' Day, which encompassed everybody else. But the Druids, who felt that they still had to honor their dead and revere their dead the right way and help them to pass on, managed to continue to provide this evening service before November 1st. So the church didn't make it go away, but the church made it turn into, instead of honoring the dead, worshiping the devil and the bad people and things like that. So they kind of turned it into what it's become
Oh,
in
our
an inadvertent way.
neighbors across the street will not allow their children to trick or treat because it's pagan.
No, and it's a shame because here it is, this type of thing that we know today was actually born out of this attempt of the church to do this. So it's a shame that that happened because it's just a fun day. It's just, it does not have a religious connotation beyond that. Not that people haven't turned it into that. Now, people who want to devil worship and believe in all of that, they'll use that day as well because, again, we go back to that's the day where life and death are the closest. So, the souls needed to get out of purgatory through prayer, and the more prayers said for an individual, the easier it was for them to pass along. So England, later on in the 17th, 18th centuries, started the practice of souling.
Souling.
And the kids would go door to door asking for soul cakes, which were little pieces of bread, and you may know that better than I do. There were little cakes, and in exchange for people giving them soul cakes, they would say prayers for a loved one in the home to help them pass on. And this is where the trick-or-treating tradition grew out of. So that's where that piece of it came from. Costumes, actually, they say originated in England and grew out of something called Guy Fawkes Day. Okay, so and you may be able to tell me more about it than that. Guy Fawkes Day was originally November 5th, but they feel it was close enough to Halloween that it kind of just transformed there. Can you tell us anything more about Guy Fawkes Day?
You want to blow up Parliament, if I remember correctly. And in England, they have a dummy. They put on a chair in front of their door, and they have candy, and, you know, like feed Guy. It's a big deal.
Okay.
Have your Guy Fawkes dummy out front.
It sounded interesting, and I only caught pieces of it on a TV special that was on recently, and I was trying to.
It's not like America.
Right, right.
In America, kid goes out with a number 20 garbage bag and comes full with like 30 pounds of candy and apples and stuff.
But it actually, so whether costumes or masks grew out of the Celtic tradition of trying to scare away evil spirits, or out of Guy Fawkes Day from England, we're not quite sure. And it may have been a combination of the two, where it was one thing to paint your face and try to hide from the spirits, or then don a costume, which is what they did on Guy Fawkes Day.
Well, the Catholic Church is responsible for Jesus being in December.
Yes.
We'll get into that at Christmas time.
We'll do that at Christmas time, yes.
He was born on April the 7th or something. I forget what.
More toward the springtime.
Yeah.
That's what they're saying, more toward the springtime. In 1915 was the first time that costumes were first commercially made. Before that, costumes were always homemade.
1950.
1915. 1915,
okay.
yes. And the first Halloween parade was actually touted to be Toms River, New Jersey.
Oh, your area.
Was the first Halloween parade. And the kids at that point were wearing commercial Halloween costumes. Now, the first Halloween costumes in 1915 were all paper. Needless to say, with candles and things like that, there were a lot of injuries. By 1919, there were more durable costumes being made, and the kids were safer.
Crepe paper burned really fast.
Yes, yes. And they actually started the parade idea as an attempt to take this holiday out of the night and do away with the pranks that were occurring. And the whole prank thing came out of England and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
dog poop in a paper bag lit on your front porch.
Yes.
Well, our next segment is going to be on trivia.
Yes. Yes.
Pumpkin trivia, Halloween trivia. Anyway, you're listening to Senior Mo with Nurse Linda, and we'll be back with part 2 shortly.